Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into the enduring world of William Shakespeare.
Yes, and you've gathered some really interesting material for us to look at. Quite a mix.
Yeah, everything from, you know, academic takes like Cambridge University Press
Mm-hmm.
to a blog connecting Shakespeare and emotional intelligence, which sounds fascinating.
Definitely. And there's also a guide to famous quotes, a discussion from educators.
Right, in the school library journal and even a Reddit thread. So, lots of angles.
Our mission, really, is to get beyond the usual answers, to dig into why Shakespeare is still so prominent centuries later.
Exactly. Why does he stick around? We want to explore that relevance, tackle
Yeah.
some common questions you might have.
And maybe challenge a few assumptions along the way.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where should we start? That Cambridge University Press piece, maybe? Why teach Shakespeare?
Yeah, that's a good starting point. They interestingly flip the question right at the beginning, why not teach him?
Right. And they give these great examples of students actually doing Shakespeare, not just reading it.
Uh-huh. Like a dance drama of the Tempest?
Or making the classroom into Verona for Romeo and Juliet. It shows that kind of active engagement.
It really does. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What is it about these, well, old plays that still sparks that kind of creativity?
So it suggests there's a vitality there.
Absolutely. It's not just dusty books on a shelf.
So the Cambridge piece then lays out four key reasons. The first one really stood out to me, abiding and familiar concerns.
Ah, yes. The idea that the core human stuff hasn't really changed.
Exactly. Parent-child relationships, for instance, like Capulet and Juliet, that control.
Or Polonius and Ophelia, the advice that goes wrong. Lear and Cordelia.
Even those brief moments like Seward in Macbeth hearing about his son, they still hit home.
And it's the depth he gets into, isn't it?
Huh.
It's not just parents and kids. It's the nuance, the complexity.
That's a great point. The suffocating control, the flawed advice. It feels real, even now.
Because those tensions, autonomy versus guidance, generational clashes, they're still fundamental, you know?
Definitely. And it's not just family. He dives into love, hate, jealousy, morality.
Gender, power. All the big ones.
And even though it's Rome or Scotland or some imaginary island, the core experiences connect.
Take measure for measure.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy, the abuse of power.
Feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it, when you think about justice and politics?
Mm-hmm. That link between private lives and public consequences, like all the things leading to Romeo and Juliet's deaths.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Okay, so that's the first point. What's the second one from Cambridge?
The second is student development. This goes beyond just, knowing the plot.
Right. It's about what students gain from studying him.
Yeah, like acquiring knowledge, vocabulary, sure, but also the Elizabethan stage context.
Or even historical links like colonization and the Tempest.
Exactly. But it's also personal growth, building confidence, maybe through performance.
Learning to collaborate, sparking imagination.
And that emotional side, too, exploring feelings in a safe space.
That's interesting. They suggest it can lead to empathy, like really understanding Ophelia's experience, for example.
Yeah, and developing critical thinking,
Yeah.
arguing about moral issues, judging characters' actions.
What how you feel about Capulet's treatment of Juliet?
Precisely. The piece sums it up nicely. Shakespeare develops the understanding heart.
I like that. Okay, so familiar concerns, student development. What's third?
Language,
Yeah.
which is, of course, a huge one with Shakespeare.
Can't avoid the language.
No, but they see it as a model, a resource. It's got formality, but also amazing flexibility.
Think of Hamlet, the difference between who's there at the start,
So immediate, so urgent,
and then the deep reflection of to be or not to be.
totally different registers. And language is action, too.
How Antony persuades the crowd.
Or how Iago twists things with words.
Yeah,
Juliet declaring her love, Macbeth's guilt spilling out.
it's powerful stuff. They also mention enabling difficulties.
Hmm. The idea that the language is hard, yes,
Yeah.
but tackling it brings satisfaction.
It's not just decoding, it's unlocking the power of language, becoming better readers, writers, speakers.
Listeners, actors. It enfranchises you, in a way.
Okay, and the fourth reason from Cambridge.
The fourth is otherness. The very fact that Shakespeare's different from another time.
That his world isn't our world.
Exactly, and that's part of the value.
Yeah.
Education should open doors beyond what we already know.
So encountering different ways of living, different values.
Right. His characters are familiar in their humanity, but also kind of exotic, often pushed to extremes.
It invites you into these intense situations, these remote worlds.
And you learn from that encounter with otherness, Plus, the sheer genius
You
factor.
can't ignore that, his significance in the language and literature.
It pushes you to think beyond the here and now, to theorize about these imagined worlds.
So that Cambridge piece gives a pretty comprehensive academic case for Shakespeare.
It really does. Covers a lot of ground, personal, linguistic, cultural.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. We have this blog post by Chris Golis, Shakespeare and Emotional Intelligence.
All right, this is an unexpected link. Using Shakespeare in, of all things, an MBA program.
Yeah, to teach leadership lessons. Golis uses this model, the 7MTF-HUM framework,
Which is basically a way to map personality drive.
and applies it to Shakespearean characters. That's quite a modern lens.
It is. And he draws parallels, like with Julius Caesar. Caesar's maybe tunnel vision.
His failure to consult stakeholders, as Golis puts it.
Yeah, and he even connects that to a modern political event in Australia. It makes it feel very current.
It really does. And he also talks about Shakespeare's skill in portraying corporate psychopaths.
Like Edmund in King Lear, or Cassius, or Claudius in Hamlet.
He seems impressed by how well Shakespeare understood those kinds of personalities.
Well, it shows Shakespeare's grasp of psychology, doesn't it? These aren't simple villains.
No, they're complex, disturbingly recognizable sometimes.
And the fact we can analyze them with modern frameworks, it just underlines how sharp his observations were.
Okay, so from psychology to famous quotes. This Oxford Learning College blog, 10 of the best Shakespeare quotes.
Ah, this is useful. Demystifying those lines everyone knows or thinks they know.
Right, like love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. From Midsummer Night's Dream. Basically, personality overlooks.
Simple enough when you put it like that? Or neither rhyme nor reason, just illogical.
From Comedy of Errors and Hamlet's to die, to sleep, contemplating death and the unknown after.
Can't forget, Off with His Head, from Richard III. Pretty straightforward, that one.
Huh. Yes. And some slightly trickier ones. What the Dickens his name is.
From Merry Wives of Windsor. Apparently, the Dickens was a mild oath for the devil. Who knew?
I didn't, or Catherine in Taming of the Shrew. My tongue will tell the anger of my heart. That need to express strong emotion.
Mm-hmm. And Macbeth's stars hide your fires, wanting to conceal his dark ambitions.
Othello's plea to be remembered fairly, loving, not wisely, but too well. So much pain in that.
It's incredibly poignant. Then there's the more everyday complaint. He had eaten me out of house and home.
From Henry IV. Still relatable if someone's draining your finances.
Definitely. And Juliet's What's in a Name? Questioning those social barriers.
It's amazing how many have just woven themselves into English.
It really is. And the blog suggests things like No Fear Shakespeare or films.
Mhm.
Good tips for accessibility.
Absolutely. Okay, now for a shift in perspective. The School Library Journal article. To teach or not to teach? This gets into a debate among educators.
Yes, this is crucial. It acknowledges Shakespeare's genius, of course, but it also directly addresses the problematic stuff.
The outdated ideas, misogyny, racism, other biases.
Right. And it asks, in today's world with limited time, should we perhaps set aside or de-emphasize Shakespeare to make room for more modern, diverse voices?
It's about whose stories get valued, isn't it? Whose voices are heard and whose are potentially silenced.
Exactly. And it's not just theoretical. It gives examples of how teachers are adapting.
Like pairing Romeo and Juliet with a modern book like Long Way Down to talk about violence.
Or looking at it through adolescent brain development and toxic masculinity.
Focusing on trauma in Hamlet. Using Coriolanus to teach Marxist theory. That's thinking outside the box.
It really is. And using modern retellings to make the stories more inclusive.
The article also touches on why Shakespeare became such a fixture, potential links to colonialism.
Yeah, the idea of a civilizing mission, establishing a certain cultural canon. It challenges that idea of universal values, asking if they've mainly reflected white perspectives.
And it questions if students are truly disadvantaged if they don't study Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm. It mentions educators actively replacing him with indigenous authors, authors of color, to boost representation and relevance.
But it also presents the counterargument.
Of course. The defenders say it's important to engage with different voices, that his influence on all later English literature is undeniable.
And that you might miss a lot in other works if you don't understand the Shakespearean foundations.
It also suggests a middle ground enriching Shakespeare study with writers like Toni Morrison or August Wilson.
Which sounds like a productive approach.
Ultimately, it reminds us that language arts is broader than just one author, right? It's about critical thinking, literacy, loving reading.
And there are many paths to those goals, so a really important discussion there.
Definitely. Now, the Oxford Scholastic Academy piece asks that direct question. Why is Shakespeare still important today?
Right. They start by saying, look, he's just incredibly recognizable, even if you only know the movie versions.
Like, she's the man or 10 things I hate about you.
Exactly. And their reasons echo some things we've heard. First, the themes.
Yep. Life, love, death, betrayal. Hamlet's big questions, Romeo and Juliet's love.
They still resonate.
Second, the characters. Still relatable somehow.
The fact that Twelfth Night can become She's the Man proves that, doesn't it?
Good point. Third, his linguistic impact. All those words and phrases he supposedly coined.
Hundreds of them. All of a sudden, green-eyed monster, lonely, upstairs. It's embedded in our language.
And fourth, his impact on theater. The Globe, the prestige of acting Shakespeare. It's still a benchmark. And they circle back to what we learn. Insights into human nature, empathy, the power of language.
So again, these core ideas keep surfacing. Themes, characters, language, theater.
They really do seem to be the pillars of his endurance.
Okay, one more source, this Reddit thread. How is Shakespeare still studied today?
And this one's interesting because the original poster specifically asked for the practical, historical reasons, not just timeless themes.
Yeah, they wanted the how, not just the why.
So people chime in with things like, well, his plays were popular then.
And crucially, the texts survived the first folio, the quartos.
Right. He was apparently the most widely read playwright of his time, which obviously helps ensure survival. There's even talk of lost plays, like Cardenio.
Someone mentions the British Empire's influence later on.
Though the original poster wasn't fully convinced about the early impact there, and the focus of Western education systems on Western classics.
But the thread gets into the nuts and bolts, how his contemporaries gathered and printed his work.
His popularity with the public and other writers was key. And then later, canonization by figures like Matthew Arnold when English became a formal subject.
And patronage, the support from Queen Elizabeth, King James, that helped keep theater alive.
Absolutely. And the physical printing quartos, the first folio that was essential for spreading the work.
It wasn't just one person, it was a collaborative effort to get that first folio printed.
And then you have things like the 19th century boom in collecting rare books, this bardism, this adoration of Shakespeare.
Plus, having permanent theaters where scripts could actually be stored.
It all adds up. It really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From just artistic merit to the material conditions of survival.
One commenter even argues his influence is so foundational you need to understand him to understand later English lit.
It's a compelling point. It shows that a work's survival is this complex mix art, context, history, luck.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, it feels like we've seen a whole spectrum of reasons for Shakespeare's lasting power.
Definitely. The timeless themes, the relatable, if sometimes flawed characters, that's clearly a huge part of it.
His incredible impact on the English language, how we speak and write.
And his influence on theater, shaping drama for centuries.
But also those historical factors, how his work was actually saved and spread.
The popularity in his own time, the patrons, the printers, the collectors, the educators later on, it all played a role.
And his continued presence, debated as it is, in schools and pop culture today.
It really highlights that there isn't just one simple answer, it's multifaceted.
And the ongoing conversation itself, the fact you're still debating his place, shows he still sparks something.
Absolutely. Which leads us to a final thought for you to consider.
We've talked about artistic merit, but also patronage, print technology, how literary study developed.
Think about how all those forces combine to cement Shakespeare's position. Beyond art, what other factors, maybe less obvious ones, do you think help creative works survive and stay prominent over the long haul in any field?